So I'm Paul Gosling. I'm English, been living in Derry for 20 years. I am by background a journalist. I was writing for The Independent for 20 years before it moved online only. Been writing about accountancy for 30 odd years. I was approached about the fact that I am by character, by nature, a supporter of Irish unity. And I was approached about writing a book on Irish unity to look at the economic case for it. I did a series of reports, and then we discussed converting those reports into a book. And now that's got a second edition. So that's broadly where I come from. In terms of politically, I was a Labour councillor in Leicester in England from 1987 to 1991. I was a former secretary of the Labour Party in Leicester. I was former secretary of the Trades Council in Leicester, supporting the miners' strike, and I was a founder of Red Pepper magazine, on the national executive of the socialist movement. These days, I'm not really doing much in terms of journalism. I'm in 4 days a week. I'm employed to work for Sinead McLaughlin, an SDLP MLA, as her policy advisor and parliamentary assistant.
Okay. The question I've asked a lot of people in civic nationalism is this: your preference, is it an agreed Ireland, a shared Ireland, or a united Ireland?
I would hope that all three are the same thing, Henry.
Are they?
Sorry?
Are they?
Well, yeah, I say I'd hope that they are. I think that we have fundamental problems in Northern Ireland that have to be resolved however you look at it. The lack of integration within our society is one of those problems, but it's not the only problem. We have what is essentially an economically dysfunctional society as well as a socially dysfunctional society. So if you start with the premise that you have to deal with the social dysfunctionality and the economic dysfunctionality, then you have to think about how you're going to resolve those problems. It seems to me that one of the problems we have is an unhealthy dependence on the English exchequer, and that has created a dependency culture within our political society, which is mirrored by the structure of our society. I mean, it is a serious problem that we do not adequately invest in the education of kids from working class backgrounds. And that feels to me like not just a symptom, but also a symbol of the dysfunctionality of our society. We are in a way even more class-based than England is, and England is horribly class-based. So if you start with the question, how are we going to resolve the problems? I think then you'd have to conclude that the current structure doesn't work, hasn't really worked ever. And so you have to have a different one. But if you look at the fact that the southern structure of society is much better than the one in the north, then it seems to me on those grounds that actually unity is a better approach to dealing with the problems that we have economically and socially. It's not a perfect society, but it's a better society than the North. I don't believe that we can achieve social integration within the way Northern Ireland is currently set up. I don't see that we're going in the right direction. And I think Brexit makes it fundamentally worse. And I can't see that Northern Ireland is going to improve as Northern Ireland. So we have to look at an alternative.
I want to pick up a couple of points that you raise. You talk about integration, and this is a divided society. Do you actually think it's going to be any more integrated if there's A, a border pull, or B, some sort of 50+1 majority United Ireland? I mean, it'll still be divided. In fact, the argument goes it'll be more divided and probably more violent.
Well, there's going to be a border poll, and so we have to deal with the consequences of that anyway. We haven't got over the fact that Brexit divided our society, treated people without respect. So I think we need to have a conversation that does treat people with more respect. which is one of the reasons why I don't think that Sinn Féin is in any position to lead a conversation around this. I think you have to have other ways of dealing with it. I mean, I do think that there are signs of optimism, which is, and this is where Stormont has a particular problem, that actually our society is no longer divided on the original lines of formation around Protestantism and Catholicism, that actually you've got a much larger section in the middle. And I think Queen's University's analysis has shown that you've got many more people like me that actually don't fit in with either definition. A lot of people that would see themselves as fundamentally European in outlook, and a lot of people that don't want to be identified on the basis of religion. Now, yeah, I absolutely accept that we have a serious problem, and there is a serious problem in terms of the risks of violence. But actually, I've spent a lot of time talking with people from political loyalism, and political loyalism, parts of it, is much more progressive than the leadership of unionism. And there is, I think, a problem of political unionism that they have to deal with. That's perhaps not answering much of your question, but I just don't think that we can put everything on hold because of the fear of returning to violence, because that always will hang over you. The unity conversation has to involve a fundamental reform of the health system in the South, that actually you don't talk about unity or shared society based on the existing Irish state. You actually have to have a reformed state that takes into account the concerns of people from Northern Ireland. And those are, to a large extent, the concerns of people in the South as well, that actually the health system is not fair because it is an insurance-based system. So that I believe that you need to have a transition towards a new Irish state, and that transition involves creating an integrated health service, North and South, recognizing that you don't get the efficiencies of scale in the North that you need in order to have an efficient health service, and actually creating a free at point of delivery healthcare system for the North and South as an integrated health system is the best way forward. And that is probably the only way that you can win a referendum anyway.
The referendum, whenever that may be. When do you think, I mean, this is not, you can't be scientific about this, but obviously, when do you think a reasonable time period should, you should be aiming for in terms of a poll?
I think that we have to have the conversation first, and you have to have two sets of referendums. So I think that talking about having the referendum in maybe 3 to 5 years' time gives you a reasonable time to have the conversation. And then you have maybe a 10-year period of transition, something like that, where it might even be bit by bit constitutional change. So basically, we have a system in Northern Ireland that needs to be working much better, and we need to achieve agreement over what the new society looks like. And you have to have a period of negotiation. Now, Seamus McGuinness from Esri has referred to the fact that the Hong Kong handover took 13 years. So I think that we're talking about a process that takes between 3 to 15 years, really. That actually is unrealistic to talk about anything that happens overnight. But I do think Brexit changes things, because I think that because we are achieving something close to economic union within the island of Ireland, I think that will also change the nature of not just the commercial, but also the social relationships within the island. I think, yeah, I mean, for some people, I mean, Stormont doesn't work and we need to get rid of it. But many other people would say, well, Stormont is absolutely essential. So we need to talk about whether you would have a federated society within United Ireland. And you have the same problem that you had in England some time ago, where John Prescott put forward the idea of regional assemblies and then found some regions didn't want regional assemblies. And how do you deal with that when some regions do want it and some of the regions don't? So, you know, does Connacht and Leinster want a regional assembly? Cork maybe does. Does Galway, Limerick? I don't know. We have to have that conversation. But I mean, the Good Friday Agreement makes it clear that the expectation is that Stormont would continue. So I think you work from the presumption that Stormont would continue, that Stormont would have devolved powers, and then you have to have a conversation with Cork in particular, whether it wants something similar for the Cork as well. So one of the outcomes, and this touches on what Gordon Brown's talking about today, is the fact that one of the ways that the Irish society was fundamentally reformed was through the use of citizens' assemblies. And we need to have citizens' assemblies in the plural in the north in order to resolve some of those problems.